Hello. Hey, this is Dave, our interpreter for today.
Good to see you. Does this make you nervous? I'm here with the artist Christine Sun Kim in her Berlin studio. Christine is an American artist who deals with the politics and language of sound. And today we'll chat more about how art plays a role in her life and also what deaf perspectives can offer in terms of communication. So this year, Christine is exhibiting pretty widely around the world. She has 4 shows in Seoul, as well as 1 show that just traveled from the Whitney Museum in New York to the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. That show, the one at the Walker, you can find more through audio and video guides through Bloomberg Connects, our collaborator for the series. So hello, thank you for having me. I read that when you were just entering art school or the MFA program, you struggled with conceptualizing ideas. But now it feels like ideas are very clear for you. So what happened or what changed between then and now that helped you gain that clarity over time?
So people often ask me the question, do you just have a clear idea and then you make things? And I really don't. I have years and years of trials and errors. I've probably made 20 small illustrations that I tear up before I get to something that I like. Yeah. I don't like to see something that is messy or doesn't look great. I don't like to just leave it in the corner. I throw it away. And that's how I process things in producing art. But the process really starts long before that. It's years and years of figuring out my rhythm. In my career, I've had to find my space first, then build it off of specific vocab. And once I've developed that vocabulary, then I develop a grammar, and I integrate these things together. It may sound a bit cheesy, but I've developed my own language. Now, I feel like I'm in my grammar period.
What is changing now in your life that is encouraging you to expand beyond what you've done previously?
I've said this in many interviews. I come from a place of fear of being misunderstood. And my platform is becoming larger and larger. I've been moving into the global level. And this is great because my audience is really diverse. It's not just deaf people. It's Americans, it's Europeans, it's artists, non-artists. Now I've moved into the Asian market. So I've calmed down a little bit with regards to clarity or ambiguity. I want to call it abstraction, but I don't really think it has to do with ambiguity necessarily or clarity. I would like to move towards abstraction and leave the room to decide or the audience to decide rather than over-explaining. I would like to move into work that will allow me to do things without words. I've become much more confident in myself and much more comfortable with the idea of abstraction. And I think that's where I am right now. I feel good about that. So for the last 1 or 2 years, I've been focusing a lot on a mind series. So I had been previously focusing on echoes, but I thought that I wanted a new shape. I've been thinking a lot about my state of mind. So the way that you sign mind is like this. So this is why I've been putting this in the upper right, because it's from my perspective, my POV. So that's where the mind goes. So then we have mind strong. And it's a little bit notational in nature. It's kind of a notation of American Sign Language. So it's a perfect circle. And I'm thinking of it as a sort of mass or a stone. And then we have 3 minds coming into the same room and clashing with one another, which is my relationship with my 2 kids. We're never on the same page. We're always in this really chaotic state. But at the same time, we love each other, and so we are touching here, you know? And I've started to think about my mind landing, and maybe landing on another mind. And this is homage to Nam June Paik, the artist. The moon is the oldest TV. So I was thinking about the moon, or his moon, as a weight on my mind. So I'd been testing with this, cutting it out, painting it, giving it a little bit of color. It's quite dark here, but it could depend on the space between. So I've been experimenting with a number of different shapes here, and the spaces in between these shapes. These feel very different. So if they were very close together, they sort of affect one another, don't they? So really the rule is that the pairs must stay together, right? That's the only rule, but the rest really it just depends on the space and any other conditions. And I'm really excited to be showing this at Gallery Hyundai. So we're in the process of making these canvases now. They will be arriving next week, and then we'll see. Great. At the Whitney and the Walker shows, there are these big canvases all day, all night. I have a smaller version of that I can show you.
I'd love to see.
Like to see.
Yeah. I love this. But when you're making pieces like this, I know it's of course the gesture, but then it's still your line, or actually are you kind of scanning exactly where your hand is moving in space?
In my head, it looks like this.
Oh, okay.
I always feel like I have to justify my answer. Like, okay, in this specific context, you would do this specific thing. And this is really how I think I have to over-explain things in some ways. So I have to make 15, 16, 17, 18, 20 different illustrations of the same concept to just cool my anxiety a little bit. I work through it, and then at the other end, I'm okay. So these two fortissimi become fortissimind. And it holds the line of the mind down, but still creates this larger arc. And then I have pianissimind, and this is much more quiet, much more calm in nature. So this is new. So I've noticed that I've been using the word weight a lot more. You know, the mind is a weighty thing. It's also, I've been thinking about specific phases. So before Rome, I was thinking through the mind a little bit. And when I was in Rome, I was able to land a little bit. And I like where I am now, mentally. So I've been trying to figure out, how do I keep that? So if we have this sign, keep, and it kind of holds something in place. And we have stay. So then we have keep, stay. Sort of trying to pin it down, not letting it change. And so I want the mind to stay here. So I've been making variations of these shapes, sort of trying to think through these things. So where the shade would actually be. And this is a little bit blended in, it's a little bit obscure, but then we have a much darker black line. So do you want to do something for me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then you would just draw, sort of make some marks in that area and then rub it out, sort of blending the charcoal.
Does this make you nervous?
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
You're doing great, sweetie.
Something else I'm curious, as you're now spending more time in Korea, you have always identified more with your deaf identity rather than your Korean identity. And so do you feel that is shifting the more time you spend in Korea?
Definitely, absolutely. You know, when I was born and growing up, my parents were immigrants in the 70s and 80s, and time sort of froze for them. And when I moved to Germany from the US, I mean, where there are very few Koreans, I was less exposed to Koreans here. This made me stand out even more, and really, I felt really Korean. And so a lot of Germans would see me as Korean first. the United States, in the coastal cities, that's not the case. But I really stand out in Germany. And I was just like, I get it, okay? But yeah, I guess I'm just more aware of it in good and bad ways. But I was very excited to join Gallery Hyundai, and I don't know what that means for the future. But I feel more connected to my Koreanness than ever before. Now I am a mother, I have 2 children, and so I want to think about what I can pass on to them and really have them understand that they are Korean as well. So I think going to Korea more this year will be good for me.
I'm really curious, everybody comes to art a little bit differently, whether they grew up with it, whether they came to it later. For you, what was that first moment that you remember being interested in art or even wanting to become an artist?
When I studied for a single year graphic design in undergrad. This is where I understood for the first time that you can get your story, your information out there if you use the right amount of shape or color or space on a surface. And it started to veer from there. That was one answer. I was a museum teacher, educator at Whitney for a few years. And during my time as a young deaf person, deaf people didn't go to museums, especially art museums. Maybe sometimes history museums, but for contemporary art, it felt very intimidating. It felt, that was a hearing space. And so I would give notes in ASL without an interpreter to make it more of a deaf space. And so this is another answer. Another answer is that I see art. Unfortunately today, it feels that people look at art as deprioritized, as not equal to things like math, science, language. Art is the best tool for your mind to really envision every solution possible. If we have an issue that we need to resolve, art helps you imagine things. It points you in the right direction. It could be there or there or there. And it helps you envision the path to that horizon. So it's a perfect way to guide yourself. And as we devalue art, I'm afraid of what that looks like. Where is the critical thinking and imagination? What is that going to look like?
Speaking about accessibility to the art world, is that something you find important, that you're able to share art with more people?
But part of deaf history is not well archived, especially digitally. So I've been thinking about what are deaf aesthetics, rather. We can sort of point to certain things, but they're deaf aesthetics in obscured ways, or they've been erased, or they've disappeared, they've been lost to history. And so I've worked within the deaf archive to sort of categorize different things, and I went to the first deaf university, the only deaf university in the world, Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. And a friend of mine who is responsible for the archive there brought me in, allowed me to take pictures, and I can show you some of what I've been doing with that here. These are deaf materials. I've just gotten the copy, but this is coming out in the fall. This is from the publisher Primary Information, and they're amazing. For example, so we have a 10,000 won banknote. This is drawn and painted by a deaf artist, and people don't realize that. So there are a number of different things that I've put in here. We have a number of celebrities showing the I love you handshake. We have 2 popes, the most recent pope here as well, doing the I love you, the sign for I love you. So these are all things that I've seen growing up. They could be shirts, they could be captions. So this is coming out in the fall. I hope people run and get a copy.
I'll get a copy. It's actually fairly unique where you've worked at a museum as an educator, you've gotten to MFAs, you've worked within the traditional gallery scene of now having 3 galleries worldwide, you've shown a little bit of everywhere, but now you're also working with an agency, which is a fairly new model that's been developed over the past few years. And also, I think you're quite open to commercial collaborations in ways that I think a lot of artists are very wary of. How did you become so comfortable navigating all of this? And is it intentional of like having all these different platforms, all these different perspectives that help advance your career?
I think I was always between 2 platforms, 2 communities, 2 industries. I was never fully in one spot or another. Which has made me comfortable. I never liked the idea of only working in art for an arts audience. I know that there are people who would benefit knowing exactly what an artist is or what it isn't. But staying in that small group of people felt easily suffocating, which is maybe one reason why I've been open to trying a lot of different things, sort of working more in commercial spaces, doing fashion or food or art with science. I think that that's very interesting, actually. You know, I sort of have the attitude where I'm curious and open-minded in those ways.
But just generally, like, if you look back on your career, what advice would you have given your younger self to get to where you are now?
So before you can really find your voice as an artist, it is totally okay to look at some famous, well-known work and try to copy it. I think it's important to really work through that painting. You know, if you have a Picasso, for example, and you want to paint that specific thing from that time period, and just make an effort, make different attempts. And it might be embarrassing because it looks like a copy, but it's the best way to really understand that person's place in history. That's perfectly fine. Of course, it's not something that you are going to be putting in a group exhibition, but experimenting through copying, I think, is my perhaps unpopular opinion.
Were there artists that you were copying when you were younger?
I don't know if it counts. But Garfield? I don't know if that counts, but I also loved Tim Burton when I was younger and copied his work. But, you know, it helped me break away from that. I think copying is really good to get you started. Thank you. I'm Christine Sun Kim. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Maybe we can cut out the Garfield and Tim Burton part.
I like that part. Yeah.